Hi everyone, welcome back to Difference Frames the World, a channel to see the world from a different angle. Today's topic is about U.S. warships crossing the Taiwan Strait, which escalated tensions ahead of Trump's planned China visit. Between January 16 and 17, 2026, the U.S. guided missile destroyer USS John Finn and the oceanographic survey vessel USNS Mary Sears passed through the sensitive Taiwan Strait, a strategic waterway separating Taiwan from the Chinese mainland. According to China's Eastern Theater Command, the People's Liberation Army monitored and warned the U.S. vessels throughout their transit and emphasized that its forces remain in a high state of readiness to defend national sovereignty and regional peace. Beijing views such transits as provocative infringements on its sovereignty, even though the U.S. and Taipei consider the strait international waters, free for navigation under international law, which the United States selectively follows. U.S. and its allies' warship passages through the Taiwan Strait have become relatively routine, roughly once a month under recent U.S. administrations. The U.S. Navy states these operations affirm freedom of navigation in international waters. China routinely accuses Washington of provocation and undermining stability in the region. Some reports and Taiwan government statements suggest about 12 foreign naval trips through the strait in 2025, but do not break down how many were specifically U.S. versus other navies. Public reports confirm 2 U.S. transits in 2025, USS Ralph Johnson and USNS Bowditch in February, and USS William P. Lawrence in April. Previous transits, such as the one in February 2025 involving the destroyer USS Ralph Johnson, triggered Chinese military tracking and warnings. It has been a pattern that has repeated since the 1950s. After the Korean War, the U.S. Navy regularly sailed through the Taiwan Strait as part of its commitment to defend Taiwan. The U.S. even maintained the Taiwan Defense Command on the island. Transits were common and largely uncontroversial from Washington's perspective, intended to deter the Chinese mainland from taking over Taiwan. After Washington and Beijing joined hands to counter the former Soviet Union, things changed. The U.S. switched diplomatic recognition to Beijing in 1979, and U.S. warship transits through the strait became rare and low-profile. The U.S. still sailed occasionally but avoided publicity to manage relations with China. During the Taiwan Strait crisis in 1995 and 1996, the U.S. deployed aircraft carrier battle groups to the region, but most operations occurred east of Taiwan, not inside the strait itself. This period marked a turning point in China's sensitivity to U.S. naval movements. For nearly 2 decades, between 2000 and 2017, U.S. warships crossed the strait sporadically, usually unannounced or disclosed after the fact. Frequency remained low to moderate. Starting in 2018, after Donald Trump entered the White House for the first time, the U.S. began publicly announcing Taiwan Strait transits. Crossings occurred multiple times per year to emphasize the so-called freedom of navigation, signal support for Taiwan, and pushback against China's claims. Under the Biden administration from 2021 to 2024, transits continued around 10 times per year on average. They were often conducted with allies such as Canada, the UK, and Australia as joint or coordinated operations. China regularly responded with military tracking and diplomatic protests. After 2025, when Trump started his second term, transits have been ongoing but closely watched, as we said earlier. The U.S. and its allies' warship transits continue, usually several times per year. Each crossing now triggers Chinese military monitoring, media attention, and diplomatic signaling. China's strong rhetoric and deployments around Taiwan in response to U.S. Navy transits serve several functions. Domestic political signaling, reinforcing sovereignty claims over Taiwan. Deterrence messaging to both Washington and Taipei against deeper security ties. Operational readiness, demonstrating PLA capability to surveil and potentially counter U.S. naval movements near Taiwan. This assertiveness is occurring against the backdrop of previously large PLA exercises around Taiwan's immediate periphery, including drills aimed at encircling the island and testing blockade scenarios, which Chinese authorities link partially to U.S. military and arms commitments to Taiwan. This time, Two U.S. warships transit the Taiwan Strait 2 weeks after Beijing conducted its largest ever drill to besiege Taiwan at the end of 2025, aiming to show Taipei that the U.S. has not abandoned it yet, as Donald Trump was indifferent when the PLA suddenly appeared 9 kilometers away from Taiwan's seashore without notice. Taipei typically monitors but does not militarily contest U.S. transits, while describing the strait as international waters. Such passages are seen in Taiwan as symbolic support for its security and for the freedom of sea lanes. For some separatists on the island, they even welcome such transits as if the U.S. were willing to protect them. For Washington, it is a gesture that the U.S. is not afraid of China's rising military presence in the region. Also, it sends USS John Finn, an 8-year-old child, not those rusty grandpa-class vessels, to transit the so-called international waters this time, aiming to tell China the U.S. also has young ships to face its Type 055 dumplings. It is like an old guy in his 80s bragging about his competence at having new babies, even though he has to find sperm in Japan or South Korea. President Donald Trump is widely reported to be planning an official visit to Beijing in April 2026, during which he is expected to meet with President Xi Jinping to discuss trade, Taiwan, and other issues. After the U.S. attacked Venezuela and flew Maduro and his wife to New York for trial, Beijing and Washington have been at odds. Some analysts are guessing the Chinese government may not officially extend its invitation to Trump. While Trump has recently spoken optimistically about economic engagement with China, emphasizing his good relationship with Xi Jinping, the strategic competition over Taiwan persists. Both sides are under internal and external pressure. U.S. members of Congress have warned that Taiwan and trade issues could derail broader détente, hinting at simmering tension despite a temporary tariff pause. Beijing condemns U.S. military freedom of navigation operations and openly frames them as violations of its core interests, especially when linked to U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. Analysts suggest that despite these pressures, both capitals have incentives to manage risks so that scheduled high-level meetings are not completely derailed. Trump's planned trip to China will make no difference, as his first visit to China harmed the relationship between China and the United States. After seeing the glorious Forbidden City, which is 10 times more impressive than the shabby White House, Trump became so jealous that he immediately started the trade and tech wars with Beijing after returning to his country. God knows whether he would launch another space war with China if he found China is more beautiful than he saw 8 years ago. When it is so close to holding a high-profile summit in Beijing with his Chinese counterpart, he ordered his warships to transit the highly sensitive Taiwan Strait, aiming to play the Taiwan card again to get more dimes out of China's pockets, either from Beijing or Taipei. The problem is that if U.S. military activity in the Taiwan Strait continues at a high tempo, it could make China publicly frame Trump's visit within the context of U.S. interference in China's internal affairs. It could also increase Beijing's leverage to extract concessions on trade or technology issues by linking military tensions to broader bilateral negotiations. That is, if the U.S. wants to maintain its military presence in the West Pacific, it has to consider Beijing's reactions, especially regarding Taiwan and Japan. One may picture this: if China, together with Russia, employs the enemy state clause and punishes Japan, what will the U.S. do? From Beijing's perspective, beating Japan is equal to lecturing the U.S. If the U.S. cannot protect Japan, what can it do for other allies? Of course, Beijing wants a relatively peaceful environment to develop, so it will not push the U.S. to its limit. In this calculus, both sides may publicly downplay military incidents to preserve diplomatic avenues, even as substantive competition over Taiwan and other strategic matters persists. The recent U.S. warship transit through the Taiwan Strait exemplifies ongoing geopolitical frictions in East Asia driven by U.S. commitments to freedom of navigation and Chinese claims of sovereignty over Taiwan. At the same time, despite these tensions, both Washington and Beijing appear determined to maintain channels for dialogue at the highest level, with Trump's planned visit to China in April 2026 representing a key touchpoint. How military posturing and diplomatic engagement intersect in the coming months will be crucial for regional stability and the future of U.S.-China relations. It also leads to the last question of today's video. Many analysts say the U.S. will abandon Taiwan, and the Chinese mainland will reunite with the island in 2026. Will it come true after Trump visits Beijing?